Waters, this video is going to be a little different. I want to talk about innovation in the guitar industry. Every year, guitar players ask the exact same question. Why doesn't the guitar industry innovate? And the fact is, they are. They're just not doing it where you expect it to be coming from. This year, I got to go to the Woodwire Volt show in Anaheim, California, happening at the same time as the NAMM show. This is my second year attending, and it was bigger than ever. And for the last 4 years, I've attended the Fretboard Summit in Chicago in August. I'm going again this year. It'll be my 5th year. I'm really excited to get back there. Those shows have taught me one thing. The movers and shakers in this industry are not the big companies. They are not Fender. They are not Gibson. They are not PRS. They are not Ibanez. They're the small brands. The small brands are the ones out there taking risks, out there trying new things. They are delivering what players are asking for, and the market is proving them right. And that's when big brands come along and take those ideas and run with them. But big brands are risk averse. They are not going out on a limb to see what else is working. They're going to continue to do the thing that they know is safe. Most large companies use what's called a fast follower strategy. The way it works is they wait for a small company to prove an idea. They wait for players to adopt it, and then they wait for the market to validate it. This is an extremely common practice. It's not about cowardice. It's not about ignorance. It's not about incompetence. This is about dollars and cents. This is about incentives. Big companies don't want to take those risks. They want little companies to take those risks, and then they will take what they know works. A small builder has the advantage of being able to fail 5 times, 6 times before they finally have a breakthrough. Big companies don't always have that advantage. They will just not gamble away because a small builder takes the risk and it's a small loss. If they fail and they flop, a couple hundred people know about it and it's not that big a deal. But when a major company fails or has a flop, it can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and damage their legacy and reputation in the industry. Small companies ask what's possible. Big brands like to ask what's safe. That leads to a pattern that we keep seeing. Boutique builders experiment, players adopt the idea, the market proves demand, and the big brands follow. This is fast follow strategy. I want to talk about a couple of examples. I'm sure there are many others that we can come up with, and if you know of a few that I'm not thinking of, please put them in the comments below so we can talk about them. The first one, I want to talk about Dan over at the Gig Rig. When Dan developed the Gig Rig, the idea of a MIDI-capable switching system with true bypass loops where you could reorder them and do some of the other tech that we've come to know Gig Rig for was not common in the marketplace. There were people who had big Bradshaw rigs out there, but those were usually cost prohibitive and only really found on big stages with big artists who could afford it and have a tech that set it all up. Dan had the idea that he wanted to bring that kind of tech to the everyday player. While not cheap, not budget, it is much more affordable and accessible than those big Bradshaw rigs. Well, it finds success. He finds players. He finds people. The market validates the product. And what happens? There is an influx of companies out there now making loop switchers. Boss introduced the ES8 and the E5. You're even seeing switchers from Fender. You're seeing switchers from EHX. There's other companies jumping on board with this technology because they now know that there's a market for it. Fast follower methodology. The same thing happens in more digital rigs. When Line 6 came on the scene with their modelers and their amp emulations, they weren't the only ones to ever do it, but they'd done it in a way that nobody else had done it. and they were kind of small and kind of new at doing this. And yes, we can all poke fun at the early versions like the Spider, and we've all had, well, those of us of a certain age, had the Pod Bean. We know what those sounded like, but look where we are today. Tonex, Quad Cortex, the Helix series that Line 6 now has, the neural plugins, all of the offerings from Universal Audio, DSM Humboldt and their simplifier and their dumblifier. There are so many additional amp emulators out there, some analog, mostly digital. The market proved it had a place, and Line 6 persevered, but now the big companies are doing it. Now, Line 6, I wouldn't really call them a small company nowadays, being owned by Yamaha, famed makers of pianos and guitars and jet skis. But at one time, they were a small company doing something that nobody else was really doing. They drove the market, they drove innovation. This is why innovation feels slow in this industry. The companies with the biggest platforms are the least able to experiment because it's not safe. Because chasing experimentation, chasing innovation can be a risky business proposition. Now, in our industry, the musical instrument industry, the one we all care so much about because we care about the gear, there's not as much of the shareholder risk, but some of these companies are publicly traded. But in the end, they don't go out on a limb very often if they don't think something will work. Occasionally we see it, but it's very rare. Think of Gibson in the 1950s coming out with the Flying V and the Explorer and the, not released at the time because nobody thought it would work, Modern. Those models were trashed. They were left behind because nobody bought into them. Now, could you imagine heavy metal without a Flying V? Could you imagine the legion of Explorer players without that? But still in the 1950s, Gibson was learning and fast following the upstart brand Fender, who had introduced the solid body guitar earlier in the 50s, in that decade. Fender innovated. Fender changed the game. Then they grew too fast to innovate quickly. They wait for other brands to do it. The result of all of this stagnation or slow adoption of new and innovative products makes the industry feel conservative and slow-paced, even though things are happening constantly. Instead, you see safe reissues, incremental updates, familiar silhouettes. The guitars look roughly the same as they did before, at least in the mainstream. Meanwhile, the real experimentation is happening in places without market share, in places often with no marketing budget, without dealer networks, and without the ability to scale fast enough to defend the idea. Occasionally something really takes off and people get really excited about it, and it changes the way we look at a product or a guitar. Look at what Mastery and Descendant did for the offset vibrato. Fender saw the success of those things and they changed. They altered the vibrato they were using in those guitars, introducing new ones in the professional series, and moving forward, they've made changes to make them better because the originals were a little problematic. But they didn't change them until somebody else experimented and proved that it could be done and that it should be done and that players would respond to it. So here's the takeaway. If you want to see where the guitar industry is going, you don't go to the biggest booths at NAMM. You often go to the smallest ones because that's where risk lives. That's where ideas are born, and that's where the next innovations are gonna come from. So here's the takeaway. If you want to know where the guitar industry is headed, you got to stop looking at the biggest booths at NAMM. You may have to stop looking at NAMM altogether. You need to be looking at the small builders. You need to be looking at the folks who are making significant changes. And while they look a little quirky and weird and odd and a little different than what you're used to, they're the ones adopting change that the big companies are going to end up taking on. Because that's where risk lives. And that's where ideas start. That's where the future usually shows up first. Big companies don't lead innovation. They wait for it to become unavoidable. What do you think? I'd love to hear your take in the comments below. Where do you think the industry's going? Who do you think's innovating the most? And am I wrong? Do you think the big companies are the ones innovating? Because I don't. I think it's the small companies that we need to be watching. Until next time, be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.